Hey everybody, welcome to Pop Culture Philosophers. I'm Rockin' Robbie Billups, and it's time for the weekly comic book review. That's right, everybody. Thanks for checking out the video. I am Rockin' Robbie Billups. This is the weekly comic book review. It's the show I read a lot of comic books, and I'll let you know what I thought about them, and we always start with the pick of the week. But first, let me remind you that PCP can save you money at Dynamic Forces. That's right, just visit dynamicforces.com, enter Robbie at your cart, and save 10%. And on to the pick of the week, and this week's pick of the week is Primordial #2 from Image Comics, written by Jeff Lemire with artwork by Andrea Sorrentino, coloring by Dave Stewart, and lettering by Steve Wands. This book is absolutely phenomenal. Now, I am a sucker for a really good, well-told animal story. Okay, and then when you take that and mix in like an alternate version of the space race, so you got alternative history there, and you got crazy bonkers Kubrick-esque psychedelic sci-fi, I'm down. So this is about Laika, the dog that was sent by Russia into space, and the two monkeys, Abel and Baker, that were sent to the US by space. And something happened to them, and supposedly they died as soon as they launched, right? And they shut down the space programs in both the Soviet Union and in America. But what actually happened was something way more weirder, something more like 2001: A Space Odyssey. This is kind of like We Three meets 2001: A Space Odyssey, and it works. It works so freaking much. This whole issue is about the dog's life, how the dog got picked to go into space, and using nothing but mostly just images and really like evocative composition and panel design, just tells the story magnificently well. This book was absolutely phenomenal. It was awesome. Primordial #2. If you liked issue 1, or if you were intrigued by issue 1, I think you'll get into it. And also, emoting and telling so much of a resonant story using very little, just very much like very striking techniques. And at the same time, it does move the narrative forward and introduce some new elements. So I thought that was phenomenal. Then we got The Me You Love in the Dark, issue #4, the penultimate issue, only one more. And man, this book has told a lot of story in a little amount of time. You know, we were saying it's a bit of a slow burn, feels like it's taken its time, but it's just such a perfectly paced story, especially so far. If they just nail the conclusion in the next issue, this is going to be one of the best graphic novels of the year. It's going to be one of the best comic series of the year. It is absolutely amazing. Scotty Young, Jorge Corona, Jean-Francois Beaulieu, and Nate Picos. Holy freaking cow, the masterful use of technique here. The way that the story throughout every single bit, each issue is separate and on its own, but it is all interconnected in an incredibly well-paced story that really hits a hard point here that makes everything worth it. And I cannot wait to see how they wrap this one up, because I've been loving that book. We got a new one called Newburn, issue #1. This is from Chip Zdarsky and Jacob Phillips, and this is from Image Comics. So it's this was a pretty good book. I liked it. So it's kind of very organized crime type story, right? So it's about this dude named Newburn. He used to be a police officer. Now he's like a private detective who's on a retainer for all these different organized crime families. They decided to come together as a pact, and he's kind of like their enforcer, their detective, their #1 dude who investigates all the killings and shootings and things like that. So there's a nice little mystery, a nice one and done type story in here, and the setup for what sounds to be a really exciting series. I really like this. It's got that noirish type feel, a little bit of the gangsta film. I really liked it. Newburn, #1 from Image Comics. Thought that was solid. A Thing Called Truth, issue #1. This one was all right. I was kind of looking forward to it. It's a really cool cover. The artwork is fine. It's got this nice sense of dynamic flow in the artwork, but the story was all right. It's about this woman. She's developing some kind of technology that's going to like change the world, and she's sacrificed everything in her life for it. It seems very familiar at times to Last Flight Out, but completely different, a way different thing. And also we saw something like this in another book recently. It was the Miracle Molly story. It's the Miracle Molly story. Yeah. Anyway, We've seen this story before. Right as she's about to make this huge leap in success, she gets kind of let go from the company. They take all of her work and this and that. And then she kind of winds up drunk one night. She wakes up in her car, and then there's a mysterious person there. I don't know. I thought the book was all right. It didn't really quite work for me. There were moments where it did, but it just didn't quite set up enough for me to really be interested in coming back. But having described the book again, maybe I will. Maybe I will. Image has got a lot of good books out this week, though. Let me tell you. Frontiersman #2 is one of them. So I really like the first issue of Frontiersman. It's basically like this aged superhero. He's past his prime. He's a little overweight. He's retired. He hasn't been a superhero in a while. It's heavily inspired by Mike Grell's Green Arrow a little bit. He used to be into like environmentalism and things like that, but he's just out of everything. He's out of the game. He gets coerced in the first issue to kind of come out of retirement and like live in the tree to prevent it from being cut down by this corporation or something, right? So, but the first issue did a really cool job of kind of evoking this comic book universe, this superhero universe backstory that didn't feel like it was all just like they were all avatars for other places. Like, oh, this is the Superman, this is the Batman, this is that. You know, a lot of people do that, and there's a lot of success there. But at the same time, sometimes that gets a little dull. That's not what they're doing here. These characters are totally on their own. And then issue #2, I was not expecting this. First of all, it tells a really crazy story about like redemption, forgiveness, and love, and loss. And it also does it in a very crazy, cosmic kind of way. And I was not expecting this book to go cosmic by the second issue, but it works. Even in the grounded reality of the frontiersman, I loved it. I thought it was better than the first issue. I really did. I loved the hell out of that book. Then we got The Silver Coin, issue #6. This is the Josh Williamson one. Michael Walsh, of course, is the artist on all of these, and different writers come in. So this is the start of the second arc, if you can call it that, because each book is its own story. It's an anthology. Each one is involving the silver coin in different ways. And this one is about a kid who finds the silver coin and uses it to play a fighting video game. And I had a lot of fun with this one. I liked it a lot. This was one of my favorite issues of Silver Coin so far, a series that has been a bit up and down for me. Some issues I really like, some issues I'm like, really? But this one totally worked for me. I loved it. It was a nice, like, quick, easy horror anthology thing with a nice punchy ending. I loved it. Silver Coin, issue #6. If you've been weary on that series, you might want to check that one out. I thought it was super solid. Firepower, Vampower. Has anybody ever written a book called Vampower? Because if not, I've got an idea. Firepower, issue #17. I've been loving this book. This is a very kinetic, charged, dynamic comic book. Even when they're doing exposition, it doesn't feel like it. And that's really striking to me coming from Robert Kirkman, who usually just does a lot of people talking in some of his books, right? But Firepower, especially with that artwork by Chris Samney and Matt Wilson, Russ Wooten, even the lettering, everything about this book just leaps off the page. It's got a high intensity behind it, and it really is a nice, pleasurable, fun, and light and easy read every time. And I never get lost in the story. The characters are well-rounded, well done, well executed, and the story is hitting some really big highs right now. This story has only ever let up just enough for the next action scene to be kicking off. Like, I love this book. It is awesome. It is firepower. Vampower. Get that. I want a quarter. Spawn is here. Issue 323. Some people got this last week. I got it this week. I like this issue of Spawn. Love that cover right there. That's dope. I always get these McFarlane covers. Sometimes I look at the other covers and I'm like, wow, that's really cool. But I'm committed to this bit of getting the McFarlane covers. Anyway, I really like this cover. That being said, this is kind of a follow-up to the last issue where Spawn just totally like tortured this vampire in a really gnarly, cool way. And so this is kind of like the retaliation a little bit. Like this vampire shows up and he's like, oh, yo, I'm a big bad vampire, and yo, you don't know. And it's just a lot of talking. It's got some really cool artwork. The artwork was great. I cannot believe that's Carlo Barberi. I cannot believe it. The artwork in this book was so freaking awesome. The story-wise, I was just kind of like, I don't get it. whatever. Pieces are still moving around. Just rightly so. From DC Comics, we've got Human Target. This is from Tom King, Greg Smallwood. I am a huge Greg Smallwood fan, so I really wanted to check this out. I'm trying to figure out who the letterer is. It's probably going to be at the back here. But I really like this. Okay, the letterer of Clayton Cowles, of course. That makes a lot of sense. Greg Smallwood's a fantastic artist. I am not super familiar with the Human Target. So what the Human Target is apparently he's a dude who you can pay to pretend to be you if someone's trying to kill you, and then he will take like the shot or whatever and then figure out what's going on. I don't know. He's basically hired to protect Lex Luthor one night. He winds up getting poisoned. The story sets itself up as a structure that's going to have 12 issues, 12 days in the story. They give us a little glimpse of each one, and each issue is going to be a day, and it's going to have a mystery. It's got a very like 50s, 60s kind of like quality to it, like early James Bond, sleek, cool, fun, really great, bold pop art type stuff, but very detailed and rich in texture, as I come to expect from Greg Smallwood. So I loved it artistically and structurally. It presents the beginning of a really interesting story and a very interesting way to tell it. Now, I've been here before with Tom King recently, where first issues were really solid, and then it just kind of fell apart for me. But, you know, I'm going to tell you this. I really liked this issue. I thought it was a really solid first issue. Then we have the Dark Knights of Steel. This is a high fantasy interpretation of the origin of Superman and Batman and a bunch of the DC characters, done in this like high fantasy, almost Game of Thrones sci-fi world, okay? It has different spins and twists, so all the relationships, the dynamics, they're not all quite the same in what we're familiar with, so it was interesting to read this. It's by Tom Taylor. It's got artwork by, is it Vladimir Putri? Yasmin Putri, my bad. The artwork is amazing in this book. The artwork is super clean. It's got a great sense of composition that flows right through. I mean, the story's pretty decent, honestly. Tom Taylor does a good job here doing alternate takes on things and spinning things around and doing something differently, and it was intriguing enough. It wasn't the greatest book I read this week, but it was definitely top tier, and I thought it was pretty solid. A good, solid start to a 12-issue series that involves Batman, but it's more on Superman and stuff, so that's pretty cool. Then we have Arkham City, The Order of the World, issue number 2, from Dan Watters, from Danny, from Aditya Bidikar, from Dave Stewart. I loved the second issue, even more than the first. It really starts clearing itself up, making itself known and what it's trying to do. Basically, there's all these escaped Arkham inmates since A-Day and Arkham Asylum's destruction. There's a bunch of escaped inmates out there, and what are they up to? And Dan Watters and Danny, especially with the visual representation, present some, you know, if you look back in the past, like the Tin-Eyed Man or whatever, that's got like fingers on his, he's got like hands, or he's got hands on his fingers. He's got eyes on his fingertips. It's kind of a dumb idea, and it's a dumb villain if you look him up from back in the past, but the way that Danny draws this dude, and the way that Dan Watters writes it, the whole thing, it's filled with a rich atmosphere that just stinks. And I mean stinks like in a good way, meaning like it's grimy, it feels polluted, it feels dirty, it feels savage, it feels visceral, it feels freaking scary. And I love it. It's absolutely fantastic. Dan Watters, Danny, Dave Stewart, and Aditya Bidikar killing it on that one. Speaking of killing it, Ron V, Mike Perkins, and Mike Spicer on the Swamp Thing. Aditya Bidikar's here on the lettering as well. This is the penultimate issue of Swamp Thing for now, but we do have a season 2 coming, so another series coming shortly after this one wraps up. The penultimate here, and it's awesome. Everything has been building up. We got this idea of this corporation. We got this family background for Levi and his brother. His brother's been introduced as this new villain, and now everything's been perfectly set up, and it's a great book that definitely honors its Vertigo roots, even though Swamp Thing by Alan Moore and Len Wein and all that stuff wasn't necessarily Vertigo at the time. It's definitely what is the brand of Vertigo, and now I guess DC Black Label, even though this isn't DC Black Label. Anyway, all that to say, it definitely honors the roots of everything that came before, but it's doing something new, it's doing something different, and it's turning it into something really bold, introspective, nuanced, and incredibly exciting, as a good fun superhero horror comic book should be. The Swamp Thing number 9, loved it. Then we got Batman 116. Artwork is amazing. Jorge Jimenez is back, and I applaud them. So like anytime this dude's on the book, I just flip it to any page. It's amazing. It's awesome. That being said, the story's all right. It's all right. It's already starting to lose me. Like they do something like, oh, what that happens. So they start twisting. The story is moving, is doing its thing, but ultimately, Fear State, I feel like, the build up to Fearscape was really good, I thought, and then the scope of it hasn't really been hitting me like I think it should. That being said, still pretty solid. It'd be interesting to read the Tynan run all one and done, and how it goes from their Dark Designs into Joker War into the prelude to Fear State and then Fear State. So I don't know. I mean, it's all right story wise. It just feels like this now that we're getting like we know where we're going. I think there's only one or two more issues, right? It feels like it's lacking a little bit in scope. Just a tiny, tiny bit. Batman, Superman, The Authority special. This is a one-shot comic. Okay, so the comic itself is actually pretty cool. It's Batman and Superman now has gathered a new team of the Authority, and they're going to assist him on his mission to Warworld. But before they go there, they're going to do this random side mission with Batman that involves the Dark Multiverse, and there's really great artwork by Ben Templesmith, some decent artwork by Trevor Hairsine, and it was decent. It was okay. The problem is here. Number one, this didn't need to be. Okay, this doesn't need to happen. Now, it seems like it's setting up some other stuff, so maybe that's going to unfold in some other part, and we'll realize that maybe it does work. But here's the thing so Grant Morrison and Mikkel Hanen and other artists, they just did the Superman and the Authority book, which is so clearly in another reality, another universe. He's talking to JFK at the beginning of it. He's old. The Justice League's died out. He's losing his powers. And he finds this new team of Authority, and there's a reason for that, and it makes a lot of sense. And then all of a sudden, in the last issue of Action Comics, Philip Kennedy Johnson's like, yo, and there's the Authority. They're going to help him. Like, whoa. We're jumping realities? Like, what's going on? All will be explained in this issue. Okay. No. They're just ignoring it. They're just going to pretend that it wasn't JFK. They're going to pretend like all those plot points and why he set up the Authority. Can you try to make it fit? Can you try? Just try. God. Crush and Lobo, issue number 6 of 8. This is a book I've really been liking, even though I was very hesitant to even get into it. But I think this is one of the best Mariko Tamaki books I have read from the mainstream. Seriously, I love this. I love the artwork. I love the story. In this one, it's more Crush-centric. She's out hunting down Lobo. She's only got a certain amount of time to do it. She winds up in this like space casino in Space Vegas. She gets mistaken for somebody's blind date, but she goes along with the date with her, and it's kind of going through her own issues there. And at first, I was like about to roll my eyes. I was like, oh man, I just want to get back to the fun, rambunctious nature. Well, that's exactly what they did. They tell this story delicately, but at the same time in a very fun and exciting way. Crush and Lobo's been awesome. This is issue number 6. I'll be kind of sad when it wraps up, but at the same time happy because it told a good story. I hope the next 2 issues really solidify that. Superman 78, issue number 3. I'm still liking this book way more than Batman 89, but I'm not liking it as much as I did in that first issue. There was something so magical to me about that first issue. The setup, it felt like old school Superman, the Christopher Reeve stuff, and so does this. But I don't know, maybe it's just the scope of it. Like, I would like something bigger in scope. And maybe that's just the word of the day. Certain things, I think, like, the scope of issue 1 was awesome. And then it just kind of is like, oh, this is what Superman gives up. And he goes there. I don't know. It's just not quite working for me. But I am rather enjoying it. But it is a bit tongue-in-cheek, for sure. Justice League Infinity, issue number 5. I've been really liking this series. Those first 4 issues I thought were super solid. In particular, issue number 4. Issue number 5, a little bit of a slide back. It starts getting a little bit just kind of overwrought and kind of clumsy. And it just starts getting a little bit more long-winded and boring. And so I hope that it corrects course for me. But this issue in particular just didn't quite work for me. But I have enjoyed the series overall, which is the continuation of the Justice League animated series. Batman Reptilian, issue number 5, the penultimate issue, and this is freaking a great book. This is such a great book. The artwork is great. It's not muddy or nothing. Everything is clear. I can see everything clearly now. I can see clearly now. The murk is gone from the book. But I love it. I love Liam Sharp's artwork in this issue in particular. I don't really want to go too wild into the story. Let's just say there's this other reptilian-type creature out there that's killing all these villains, and Batman finds out that Killer Croc has a lot to do with it, and Batman is not letting Killer Croc live it down. This is wild. Garth Ennis, the writing, the way Batman is, Batman just does not give an F. Like, he's just trolling Killer Croc hard. I love this book. That book's been A wild, unexpected, unpredictable ride. Soul Plumber issue number 2 is here from DC Horror. I liked it. I didn't quite like it as much as issue number 1. It was really like on the nose with its grossness, with its irreverency, it's just got this really vulgar type approach to it that just felt a little bit more unrestrained here in issue number 2. It was fun and it was interesting, but it starts trying to it feels like it takes a little bit of the nuance away from some of the points that are trying to be made. That being said, I still like the book. Just not quite as much as issue number 1, but definitely enough to continue reading it. And that artwork by John McCrae was wild. Let's jump over to Marvel. And from Marvel, we have a couple of Death of Doctor Strange tie-ins, one-shots actually, and they're actually pretty cool. First of all, we have the Avengers one-shot, Death of Doctor Strange. This is written by Alex Paknadel, who was the writer of Friendo. He's the writer of Giga. He's a super great writer, part of that White Noise crew. And it's got artwork by, is it Ryan Bodenheim? Yeah, and Ryan Bodenheim's on one of those Hickman books. I think it's Dying in the Dead. Anyway, I really liked it, thought it was super cool. It's not necessarily super important to the story of Death of Doctor Strange. Like, if you're reading that miniseries, I don't feel like you're necessarily going to miss anything here. But what this one-shot does, what both of these one-shots do, is that the idea that once Doctor Strange died, he had this, like, protective shield covering the Earth, and it came down, and now all these threats that were held at bay, be it mystical threats mostly and things like that, they now start going out of hand, including the Crimson Bands of Satoric. And that's something that Alex is playing with here. This has got a really good take on Iron Man. I think Alex Paknadel writes the hell out of Tony Stark in this issue. So I thought it was really cool, very solidly done. And so was the Strange Academy tie-in. This one by Scotty Young and Mike Del Mundo. The artwork was great in this one. And it's kind of about, so in the book Strange Academy, there's these two kids, or there's this kid that's like Enchantress's kids. It's kind of like their story and a deal that she kind of made, and then it's another after effect of that shield, that protective shield coming down. So I liked it. It kind of kept the flow and the feel and the vibe of Strange Academy. So if you're just reading Strange Academy, I would recommend that. But what I do like about both of these books is that they each tell a solid one-and-done self-contained story that you don't have to read the Death of Doctor Strange to be into, and you don't have to read these to understand what's going on there. They're just nice auxiliary kind of books and really cool things at that. So there you go. Then we got Dark Hawk issue number 3. This is from Kyle Higgins, Juanan Ramirez, and Erica Arnichia. I am still liking this Darkhawk book a lot. It's like there's a new version of Darkhawk. It's this kid, he's a basketball player, he's about to be a superstar. He turns out he's got this disease, and it's going to cause him, maybe his dreams aren't going to happen. He's down on his luck. His best friend is like part of this gang, and then he gets set up and he gets like kind of got in the last issue, and then the dude gets the gem, the amulet, he becomes the new Darkhawk. So they're playing with some of that stuff here. It's got a great sense of energy. It's got a connectedness to what's come before, but if you've never read a Darkhawk book, you can enjoy this. This is a pretty solid reimagining and reinvention of a classic 90s property, I think. Amazing Fantasy is here with issue number 4, the penultimate issue. I've been liking this book. It's an interesting take on the characters of Black Widow, Peter Parker, and Steve Rogers. So Natasha, of course. But I like it because it's told in this like fantastical world. It says like science fiction, but it does feel definitely more like fantasy, like science fantasy. And it's kind of, everything's coming together. It's about these different kingdoms, and these heroes get flung into this other world, and they get tied into the midst of all this like intrigue and battle and stuff. And I'm liking it. I'm enjoying it. So Amazing Fantasy number 4. That's the penultimate issue. From Dynamite Comics, we have Sheena, Queen of the Jungle, issue number 1. I have never read a Sheena book at all. And there were moments where I was a bit confused. I still don't quite understand who Sheena is, and how, like, she's in the real, I don't know. There was something that made me feel a bit lost, but that was very momentarily. I got right into the story. I felt kind of caught up. There's some backstory I would like to get back into and figure out more about the character. But in this one, so Sheena is like the Queen of the Jungle. She's like a Tarzan type character, it seems. And she winds up in this, they're like in this futuristic world or whatever, and this company's destroying the rainforest, but they're trying to make it better because they put up this biodome that's going to like preserve all the near extinct animals and things like that. But something goes wrong there. And so they send Sheena in to find it out. So I really liked the take on the character. I really liked the story. I liked the setup. I'm just a little cloudy on the character's backstory, so I'll get caught up on that. I'm sure John over at the Comic Collectibles show on Monday nights will let me know about that. But I liked it. And the artwork was really freaking cool. I don't think I can show you those pages. I really, really liked the artwork. I thought it was super solid, very clean. So there you go. Then we got Red Sonia issue number 3 by Mirka Andolfo. I've been liking this story. So in the first issue, Red Sonia is tasked with finding this lost child. She does. She brings it in, but they were fooling Red Sonia. She's not being delivered to her mother. She's being delivered to these evil wizards because this kid's got powers or something like that. And so now Red Sonia is on this mission to find the kid, and that's what's going on here. So it's just blood and vengeance and death and battle, and I loved it. Red Sonia issue number 3 from Dynamite. We also got Jennifer Blood issue number 2. So Jennifer Blood, it was like she's like a mom by day and like an assassin by night, and she would assassinate all these mafia people, right? In this story, she's in a town that's populated by nothing but like criminals in the witness protection program. So she's just picking them off like this. She's just, imagine Punisher in that scenario, in a suburban neighborhood that's filled with criminals. That's it. You know exactly what this book is, and it delivers. Vamperverse issue number 3 is here. It's the Vamperverse, right? So it's like all these different versions of Vampirella. One of them is like super evil named Bloodwing. She's running through like it's the Quickening, like it's Highlander, or like it's the one trying to kill all the other Vampirellas. And it works. I like the interesting takes on the characters. In this one, we get this like cool, pulpy, like noir type version, and we also get this like straight up black and white I Love Lucy type version, which was really interesting to see. Kind of reminded me a little bit of WandaVision. Vamperverse issue number 3. From Vault Comics, we have The Rush. Actually, the title of this book is This Hungry Earth Reddens Under Snow-Clad Hills. Or we can just abbreviate that to The Rush, because it's kind of about that gold rush. This takes place in Yukon territory. It's frozen, it's bitter cold, and a lot of people have gone there to try to make their fortune by finding gold. And of course, like you see in a lot of these shows, and historically, that people went there and it had already been picked clean, and it was hard life. There wasn't much to be had, and this woman has lost her son there. She went away. His dad came back. He's like, oh, I don't know why. So she's off looking for her son in this really harsh land, and there's some kind of threat there, something that's like vicious and terrible, and I guess it's a giant spider. I don't know if there's a giant spider on the cover, so it doesn't quite get to what's going on, but the atmosphere built up to it's really good. By the way, it's written by Simon Spurrier, and it's got artwork by Nate Gooden. Nathan Gooden, of course, was the artist on Barbaric, so I love the artwork here, and I really like the atmosphere provided. I just want to see a little bit more of that story develop. By the Horns, issue number 6 from Scout Comics. You know me, you know that I love this book. This book is magnificent. Jason Murr's pencil work, like the artwork in this book is amazing. There's these great double-page spreads. All of the designs are fan-frickin-tastic. We get a little bit more of a look into the villain in this one and the villain's pet. Like, every design, like the character designs are so strong that these could easily be made into action figures and would be very striking. This is a very interesting lore, very cool world building that's going on. It's gone well beyond just a simple story about a woman whose lover was murdered by unicorns, and now she's out hunting down unicorns. It's evolved so much further than that, and it's truly a hero's journey. It's a grand quest, and it is such an amazing comic book. From the writing, to the lettering, to the everything about it. The artwork, everything about this book is like top notch. This is one of the best comics on shelves. Seriously. My Bad, number 1 from Ahoy Comics. This is by Mark Russell, as well as Bryce Ingman. And this is a weird, quirky, satirical kind of take on some of the classic characters. There's a version of Batman called the Chandelier, who's a complete idiot, basically. He's like a rich dude who just doesn't have any sense of self-awareness and is ridiculous. There's a Flash type dude here. There's a lot of different little stories. There's a Hulk dude. This book was really weird, very quirky, very wild, but at the same time, it just wasn't something like that really appealed to me. It's a bunch of short stories. My favorite was the first story with the chandelier. Like, I thought that was cool. I think this is a mini series. I may keep checking it out. And there's nice like nods to things like the old like what was it, the Hostess ads and stuff. So really interesting. The Heathens #1 from Aftershock Comics, Cullen Bunn, Heath Amodio, and Sammy Cavella. I was excited to dig into this one, but it just didn't really work for me. The basic premise is this is like, I don't know, it's like certain people, they either come back from hell, they come back from hell, but they're dead still or something, but they're like historical figures. And so there's a group of historical figures called the Heathens that get brought together to hunt down other escaped people from, I guess, hell or the grave or whatever. It's a bit unclear at times. So like Stalin runs this group that involves like Billy the Kid, a couple gangsters, and some other historical figures I don't really know. It's like this Chinese pirate. I think that's historical. I'm pretty sure it is. I didn't know. And they're going after Jack the Ripper because Jack the Ripper escaped from hell or the grave or something. I don't know. It was interesting. The artwork was cool, but there was just something missing that it didn't quite hook me. But it is a really interesting premise. The Harbinger, issue #1 is here, so another launch of Harbinger. The Valiant books, they all stand on their own, but sometimes you will feel lost. But if something's intriguing, you can stick with it. One thing that's intriguing to me about this story is the artwork by Robbie Rodriguez. So Harbinger was this corporation that were activating these like people with like superhuman abilities and whatnot, and a lot of craziness has happened and has ended. But now this just picks up with one of them who has lost their memory, so it's a good way to introduce a new reader into this world, and it catches you up real quick. The artwork is really dynamic. The only problem is that there is a lot of like narration that's like a conversation between two people. That doesn't quite work for me, and it hinders the book, and it holds up the pace of the book. It's got very kinetic artwork, but a very stagnantly scripted script. I could have probably said that better. Star Trek: The Mirror War, issue #2. I think I'm just gonna, I'll collect it. Maybe I think I'll just wait till it's all done to read it. That's how it works for me with these Star Trek books. I'm a huge Star Trek fan, so when I can sit down and it's all said and done, like I'm about to do that with my Year 5 book, I can sit down and I can read it and I can enjoy them for what they are. When I'm reading them stacked with all these others, they get bogged down. They're not the best written comic books. The artwork here, though, is really cool. I like the artwork. It's by Gavin Smith. We had him on the show, actually. So I like the artwork, and the story's fine, and I'll be able to enjoy it as a Trek fan when it's all said and done. But reading it issue to issue, that can kind of get to me sometime. Last Flight Out, issue #3. I really like this book. So it's about this dude who basically has dedicated his whole life to building these spaceships to get the human population off of Earth, because he's come to the conclusion that they cannot fix the Earth. It's about to go down. It's about to die. And we need to get everybody off. His daughter doesn't want to go along with him. They don't have a good relationship because her mom died when she was young, and she was basically raised by nannies, and she doesn't have a good relationship with her father because he's dedicated all of his time to do this. So they got like 24 hours to get to the last ship that's going to take off, and he's going and he's trying to find his daughter. And in the first issue, it was a great setup. In the second issue, we're like, wow, they got there pretty quick. What are we going to do now? In issue 3, we're introducing a new perspective, a new angle on this story, some new characters, and they do it very well. I'm enjoying this book. It's well written, it's well drawn, it's perfectly executed, and it's a very solid comic book. Then we got a new Hellboy miniseries. His name was Hellboy. #1 of 4, The Bones of Giants. So The Bones of Giants was a Hellboy novel that I never read, actually. So this story is new to me. But in this one, it looks like the corpse of Thor is found. So the BPRD go to investigate, and everybody can't lift Mjolnir, and Hellboy can, and it gets stuck to his right hand of doom, and hijinks ensue. This is one of the most Hellboy-feeling Hellboy stories we've had in a while. Silver Lantern Club didn't quite nail that tone or atmosphere for me. This does a little bit more. Of course, Mike Mignola really helped flesh out and develop this story for the novel, and that's what the novelization is here for. The artwork is by Matt Smith and Chris O'Halloran, and I really like the artwork too. It has a really great sense of that atmosphere and that style that we know from the Mignolaverse. Then we got Knighted #1 from AWA Upshot. This is part of the whole Resistance world by J. Michael Straczynski, but just like Erratic, you don't really have to have read that stuff. It's interesting enough. So it's about this superhero without trying to spoil too much, it's about this superhero who dies, and then a regular Joe has to kind of take his place. It didn't quite work for me. There were moments that it was interesting, but all in all, it just didn't quite capture my attention, but there you go. And then we got Breathers by issue number 6 by Justin Madsen. I really like this book. I don't know anybody else that reads it. In fact, at my shop, I am the only person who buys this book, but I love it. Each issue is $7.99, but it's like a quarterly book. It's only every 3 months or something, or 4 months. But I love it. Like, people that are fans of like Jeff Lemire, I think you'll really like this book. It's about this world in which, and this book started well before the COVID stuff. It's a world in which this virus has been unleashed into the air, and everybody has to wear these like respirator masks when they go outside or they'll die. And some people don't believe that, and other people do, but that's not what it's about. That's just the backdrop. It's really about humanity, and it's a really sad, tragic book that has glimpses of hope in there, like gleaming moments of hope, but for the most part, it's actually kind of depressing, but the way it's told is done in such a interesting way. Each issue is like 3 separate stories, but all of them overlap. This is a crazy world that's been built here, and I really applaud it. Breathers. This book is amazing, and this is 6 issues, and nobody's reading this book. Are you reading Breathers? Have you read that book? I love it. I love the hell out of it. So that's the comics I read, but I do want to point out that this came out from Dark Horse this week. It's Buckaroo Banzai Against the World Crime League. This is the novelization of the sequel to The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension. If you know me, you know I'm a huge fan. So this is, I believe, by the original author. He's writing it in character, as if he's a character in that world being told this story. I am all for this. I cannot wait to get into it. It's a novel, but man... whew. So I'm like 180 pages through Dark Tower, the last book in the Dark Tower books. So I got to try to get through those so I can. Whew, I'm so excited for that, y'all. You have no idea. This is the most. I should be like, pick of the week. Haven't even read it. Pick of the week. This is Buckaroo Banzai. We're finally getting the sequel. Anyway, you Buckaroo Banzai fan, let us know in the comments down below. Also, let us know, what are you reading? What are you digging? What's your pick of the week? Thank you so much for checking out the video. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Join us over at patreon.com/PCP, where you can help support the channel just like HC, my man. Thank you so much for the support. We really do appreciate it. And join us over at popculturephilosophers.com for podcasts, blogs, and a whole lot more. I've been Rockin' Robbie Billups. Thanks for rocking with us. Keep on reading.